Hey everyone, it's been a while since we've recorded anything new and it's good to be back. And I guess I don't have anything else better to do now that our beloved Badgers are out of the big dance. So I'm well into my recovery from knee replacement surgery and have had a bit of spring fever lately. Thankfully, it's been one of the mildest Madison winters I've experienced in 35 years. But I swear the older I get, the colder it feels. Here in Wisconsin, spring is finally breaking through. The ice is melting. The days have more sun, and many of us are shedding the winter jacket. The familiar feel of spring is very much welcome. We go outside more often to sip coffee or tea. Productive people like my wife go in the garden and work. And I work on my fishing skills without much to show for it. Jenny encourages long walks, but I prefer to do that with golf clubs in my hand. Her method doesn't break the bank, though. And that's what life is. It's a series of rhythms and transitions, opportunities to grow and be shaped by whatever season we're in. And that's what we're about at Cross Counsel, helping people step into transformation, no matter where they are. Strong, steady, sturdy, secure, with compassion and mercy. That's been my mantra for years, and it's the heart of how we try to relate to our staff, our clients, our supporters, and you, our listeners. Now here we are, more than 3 months removed from the tragic school shooting in Madison. Back in December, I said there would come a time when the dust would begin to settle, and in that season, our role would likely increase. That time seems to be now. When the immediate crisis fades from the headlines, the deeper work begins, the work of healing, the work of facing what's been stirred up, the work of walking forward in truth. That's why we started the 100 Club, an opportunity for 100 households or churches to commit to a minimum of $100 per month to sustain and expand this work. As of today, we have 30 members, with many giving far beyond $100. It's humbling to see how God is moving through these people who believe in this mission. And we at Cross Counsel are stepping into deeper faith as well. We believe the Lord has given us clear direction this year, one that will stretch us, challenge us, and expand our reach in ways we couldn't orchestrate on our own. We'll share more soon, but for now, I ask you to pray. Not just about how you might support this work financially, but about the people God is raising up to step into greater facilitation of the MELT process, or TPM, aka Transformational Prayer Ministry. If what we're doing resonates with you, if you've experienced the impact of this work firsthand or see the need for others to encounter real transformation, we invite you to consider partnering with us financially. Whether it's a one-time gift or joining the 100 Club with a monthly commitment, your support directly fuels this ministry, making it possible for more people to find freedom through the MELT process. You can give electronically at crosscounsel.com by clicking the donate button. And if you're able, setting up a direct bank withdrawal is the most efficient way to give, keeping fees at a minimum and maximizing your impact. Most importantly, we ask you to pray. Ask the Lord how He might be leading you, not in just giving, but in stepping deeper into this mission. We're excited for what's ahead, and we're grateful to have you with us. As we move further into 2025, we will continue leaning into something that isn't easy, but it's absolutely necessary, helping people confront what's really going on inside them. It's one thing to say we want healing and transformation, but it's another to face our self-righteousness, to let go of the illusion of control, and to embrace the never popular, at least in practice, reality of surrender. Not just in a broad theoretical way, but in the daily grind, where our pride gets challenged, where our need to be right gets exposed, where trust and obedience become real. That's where transformation happens. That's where we meet Jesus in the deepest places. So as we step into this next season, let's do it together with strength, grace, and a willingness to surrender what we can't hold on to anyway. All right, so we've got AJ and Hillary coming up, but I had a few initial thoughts. I just can't shake the 23rd chapter of Matthew. There, Jesus tells the Pharisees that they strain a gnat and swallow a camel. It's certainly a criticism of the Pharisees and teachers of the law, highlighting their focus on minor details while neglecting major sins and moral issues. But it also speaks on a broader sense to what Jesus was often confronting the Pharisees on, their hypocrisy, pretending to be righteous while their hearts were far from God. He called them out for performing religious acts to be seen by others. They may have believed they had a genuine love for God, but it was, at the very least, misdirected. Jesus went so far as to compare them to whitewashed tombs, clean on the outside but full of death inside. At the core, he was challenging them and everyone to embrace truth rather than maintaining an appearance of holiness. He wasn't just exposing their hypocrisy to condemn them. He was inviting them to drop the act and actually follow God from their hearts. Okay, I'm really not trying to pick on anybody specifically here, but what also comes to mind is Comic-Con. Now, if you've never been to a comic convention, which I haven't, but you've probably seen videos or pictures of people at a Comic-Con in elaborate costumes. Cosplay is the term. It's short for costume play. It's just huge. People don't just dress up as their favorite characters, they become them. Whether it's Spider-Man, Darth Vader, Wonder Woman, or whomever or whatever, cosplayers commit to looking and acting the part. But no matter how convincing they are, they're actually not those characters. Once the event ends, the mask comes off, the costume goes back in the closet, and life returns to normal for most of those people. And that raises a tough question. How often do we do the same thing in our faith? It's easy to slip into spiritual cosplay. We wear the right clothes, say the right words, and maybe even know the right Bible verses. But has our heart actually been transformed? Or are we just playing a role? The danger isn't just about hypocrisy. It's about something deeper. A slow, unaware drift into spiritual conditioning rather than true transformation. We absorb the culture, the traditions, and the behaviors until they become second nature. And it creates a false sense of security. We assume we're good because we know how to act the part. But Jesus didn't come to make people look religious. He came to make them alive. Think about the Pharisees. They were deeply devoted to following God's law, believing they were upholding his will. Yet in their zeal for religious duty, they failed to recognize God himself standing before them. Their confidence in their knowledge and practices gave them a sense of certainty, but that certainly kept them from seeing the bigger picture. And before we shake our heads at them, let's be honest. How often do we become so conditioned by religious life that we actually stop encountering God? There's a phrase I learned in the 90s, and I've never been able to shake that either. It's called being Christianized. In a derogatory sense, being Christianized often refers to someone who has adopted the external trappings of Christianity, its culture, language, and behaviors without a true internal transformation. It implies a surface-level faith where a person follows religious customs and moral expectations but lacks a genuine personal relationship with Christ. This criticism is often directed at cultural Christianity, people who identify as Christian primarily because of family, tradition, or societal expectations, rather than a deep conviction or personal faith. Religious formalism, emphasizing rituals, rules, and appearances over spiritual depth and heart change. Hypocrisy, going through the motions of faith while living in a way that contradicts Christ's teachings. Spiritual complacency, feeling safe because of church involvement, theological knowledge, or moral behavior without actually being dependent on Jesus for transformation. And legalism, measuring faith by adherence to laws and tradition rather than by grace and relationship with God. It's a term that can be used to critique the difference between knowing about God versus truly knowing him. Today and next week, we have AJ and Hillary on the podcast. They are coming up on being married 5 years, and they've experienced a great deal of growth. This past fall, they took our Level 1 class. Taking the class helps crystallize what people who go headlong into the melt process experience. It's always a blast to hear what people learn academically in cooperation with what the Lord has been doing experientially in people's lives. This reminds me of something AJ will be sharing in the podcast. He spent years reading biographies of Navy SEALs, men who trained themselves to push past their limits, to suppress their pain, to become nearly indestructible in the face of battle. And for a long time, he admired that. But over time, he realized that many of these men weren't just mastering their bodies and minds, they were burying their brokenness. They weren't healing, they were hiding. And in a way, isn't that what we do so often in our spirituality? We put on the image of strength, of having it all together, but inside we're deeply hurting. You may appreciate AJ's insight into how his unresolved pain and lie-based thinking, which once compelled him to strive for approval and validation, can now be seen in a new light. Instead of fueling performance and self justification, his struggles now reveal the areas where the Lord desires to bring transformation, healing, and renewal. Through this shift in perspective, AJ is beginning to see what once felt like a burden is now an invitation into a deeper freedom and spiritual growth. Let's get into it. Well, how are you guys doing today?
Today's good.
It's Friday.
Yeah. Okay.
Friday.
It's
Yep.
Friday for us.
It's Friday for us. It's not Friday for the listeners.
It could be Friday.
Well, yeah, perhaps it is Friday. Yeah, no, today's been really good. It's a really beautiful day outside, so we've had our windows open and it's just like a nice cool breeze that it like smells like spring. I got a massive project done in Levi's nursery. There's like a storage unit in the wall, and it was kind of like it wasn't a disaster. It was just wasn't organized well. Like as I'm putting all his like clothes that don't fit anymore in there and his toys that he doesn't play with. Like I don't want to throw anything away because I want to have more babies, and so I want to keep all that stuff. But it's like starting to pile up. So I took everything out and I reorganized it and put it back in. And then I also organized his closet that I was just becoming a disaster. And so I feel fantastic. I love an organized life. I love organizing. Which is like surprising to AJ because when we were dating, I moved from my apartment with my friend Emma, and I was moving back into my parents' the house before we got married. And I like just did not feel like packing. And so I didn't until the morning that everyone was coming to pick me up. And I didn't have boxes or anything. And so I just put everything loose inside of my car. So my car was like bottom to top. Like it was like dishes that were just loosely in there, forks and knives and like decorations. Nothing was organized. But it all fit. But AJ was
Traumatized. Like stacking a lamp on the bottom of a car and trying not to crush the shade of a lamp because you're handing me dishes and glass bowls. Here you go.
but everything fit. So
I don't know what to say to that.
it's a great story.
Yeah, it is.
But I'm also like, but it's that wasn't like who I am because I actually like love now that we're married, like I love the label maker. I have everything so organized in our house.
Yeah, I think the fact that you have reduced a lot of what would be described as ADHD since then,
Oh
I
yeah.
think is largely responsible
Yeah.
because the ADHD roller coaster was Adderall detox, Adderall detox,
Mm-hmm.
meth, and then coming out of meth. So some of
Yeah.
the
Oh,
times you were pretty chaotic.
did you want to clarify that? Meth?
Yeah, Adderall is like two hydrocarbon atoms or bonds away from being methamphetamine.
Oh,
Yeah, it's amphetamine.
And we give it to high schoolers
It's
because
low grade amphetamine.
sure, they say that. Anyway,
so does it affect your teeth? Do you have any idea? Like meth
No.
does?
Well, I don't know actually, because since I've been on, I never had a single cavity until I went on my medication.
that's
This
a
is
fascinating
all
observation.
anecdotal. This is
Yeah,
all
yeah,
very
yeah, yeah.
anecdotal. I've never read this or anything
The
like
Cross Council
that.
podcast is not considered professional medical advice.
Right. But
Yes.
but I went from no cavities to like 12 cavities every time I go.
Hmm.
And I brush my teeth, I floss, I take like I'm
Mm,
not hygienic. So that is an intro that's very anecdotal, but
mm.
we're
We'll rabbit hole that later.
That
yeah.
is, wow, it's interesting that you're bringing that up because we were having dinner with friends a couple of weeks ago and talking about um, all the cavities they had as kids, and they didn't eat sugar. And
Mm,
then
Right.
she was talking to a dentist not that long ago and saw that she had all these fillings. And the dentist said, how good was your dental insurance as a kid? Do you have any idea? She's like, oh, yeah, my dad worked at this company where dental was awesome. Everything was covered. Oh,
Uh,
so they were, oh my
I have
gosh.
heard that actually. That was in one podcast I listened to, um, where they were talking about like What's a cavity?
Mm.
It's up
Oh
for
my
interpretation.
gosh.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oof.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say I went into the wrong business, but I love what I do. So anyway,
Right.
turning the page, right?
Yeah.
Hmm.
And trying not to be anything but full of integrity, right? So
Yes.
here we go. So I thought that we'd dig into a topic that's been coming up in a really cool way. AJ and Hillary are both in the class that we're doing, the level one, and I think they probably been learning some stuff. They're diving into the material, and we're going to talk about like having them take a step back and also for all of us to step back and see the bigger picture, that how we as people respond to outside influences and what it means to live transformationally. And I actually had this thought earlier today. It was at the end of a session. I did a session with somebody, and we had somebody watching too that's in the peer practice. And so back in 1991, I had this old Accord and started to notice some instability when driving, but I was flat broke, so I ignored the problem. I've been in Madison since 89. And so on this particular day, I was driving on the Beltline, which, if you don't know Madison, it can be like the Daytona 500 at times. So so I survived the Beltline like any other day and made my exit. And I worked in the area of West Town Mall. So there was when malls used to be a thing and all these restaurants. And I worked at Chili's on the west side of Madison. And I was just making my final turn within the mall parking lot, and my CV joint on my front axle broke, left tire, boom, just so it collapses the tire,
Mm.
which isn't awesome. So and my first thought was, oh, great, right? Got to spend more money. But then I thought that could have happened 3 minutes ago as I was going 60 miles an hour.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's one thing. But, I also think that I could have addressed that earlier, but we just, because
Mm.
of whatever, okay, I don't have the money, but it ended up costing me more money because then I had to have it towed as well and then fixed. So we talk about how we can bury our past, but our past gets buried alive. Just because you ignore a problem that's there doesn't mean that it's impacting you. What do you guys think? Just with those thoughts, how that might relate to what you've already been learning, whether it's in class or just your journey in transformation.
I think that's very true that like again anecdotally, right, that I've experienced. But in talking to other people, I think that they experience the same type of thing where um I even with the knowledge that I have that I will get freedom if I address this, I still don't want to address it. Like it's
Hmm.
still like it's hard and I'm tired of it and it's inconvenient for me to, find a babysitter or set up a time, a session or like I can't tell you how many how many times I've gone to do a session with you, Steve, and on the way there I'm just like I don't want to do this. I'm
Hmm.
annoyed that I have to go do this. Like it doesn't have anything to do with you, I promise. But it's
I
just
know.
there's work that has to go into it and it's going to be inconvenient, I think. And it's
Mhm.
probably the same thing with your car was this is inconvenient. I don't have the
Mhm.
money for it. There's
Mhm.
every excuse in the book that we can have to not to do it. But it ends up hurting us in the long run because the longer I don't address things, they don't go away. Like the problems don't go away. They're still
Mhm.
there under the surface. Um, or they're still there and I'm wrestling with them over and over, day after day after day. Lord, why can't I figure this out, you know?
Mhm.
And the Lord's always
Mhm.
just like, you know why? You need a little bit of help with this one.
Mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a good illustration.
Mhm.
Crutches help us walk, but we don't always remember that we should be able to run.
Mhm.
Um, I would say that
Mm,
something I haven't even necessarily well developed into my late 20s is that I need to let go of the idea that my pain and brokenness are helpful,
Mhm.
where I
mm,
would have walked around with a lot of lack of self-confidence, lack of um, self-esteem, right? However we want to categorize those two words. self-esteem and self-confidence, but I walked around with not a lot of it. And I thought, this makes me better at my job or my whatever because I have a lowly opinion of myself. I'm going to work harder
Hmm.
because I need to not only prove it to everybody else, I need to prove it to myself because I think I'm a
Hmm.
sloppy bag of dirt. And so because I have this low opinion of myself, I'm going to work harder. When was there maybe some level of truth to I was compensating? Sure. Did it actually advantage me in my relationships, in my friendships, in my workplace? Absolutely not.
Hmm.
Absolutely not. I would say that my inability to stand up for myself has been much more detrimental to my life than the I need to compensate for my low opinion of myself has ever been useful.
Hmm.
And so I suppress stuff on purpose because I think it's
Hmm.
helpful. And I would even expand that into a memory I have with mom, with Jenny. I had a phase in high school. Maybe you remember it, where I was reading a bunch of books by Navy SEALs, like Lone Survivor, American Sniper,
Hmm.
books like that. And gosh, I'm sure they're not indicative of every Navy SEAL that's ever walked the earth. But man, those guys were broken
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
and operated from a place of brokenness. And it turned them into soldiers,
Yeah.
into frogmen, right?
Hmm.
My stepdad beat me, so I'm never going to let that happen to me ever again. I need to be strong or
Hmm.
whatever, right?
Hmm.
Whatever place of brokenness they were operating from. None of the books that I read, none of the stories that I heard about were like, yeah, and they grew up in a nice Christian family and just out of the goodness of their heart decided to do the hardest thing on earth that doesn't make any sense and destroys your body and your mind to get to a place to be an elite warrior. And I remember mom saying to me, "Oh, because I thought I wanted to be a Navy SEAL or a Marine or something like that."
Hmm.
And she's like, "I mean, I guess I'm sorry that your household isn't worse." She said something like that. Like, I'm sorry you're not more broken, AJ. You're not like those guys. Um, but I remember the bad thing I took away from that was like, oh, so sometimes hanging on to the brokenness has an advantage.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And like that's not true.
Hmm.
That's not true.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, whether people see it externally, you're internally miserable. I think
Right.
that's unavoidable. That word miserable, I think, that's our world. So many miserable people.
Yeah.
Ugh. And it comes from loneliness and validation. It comes from the lies ultimately that we
Hmm.
believe about ourselves, which kind of makes me think too, as far as like my dad could take a car apart and put it back together again. He didn't really have the capacity to be able to have the patience to kind of teach me those things. Like I told you that once. So, and that's not a criticism of him. That's just kind of the way it was. So I, I didn't, I didn't initiate on my own to learn more. And so when I think about my car, if I would have actually gotten underneath it, maybe I could have found something, but I don't even know what I'm looking for because I'm sure if I saw a rust or if I saw a crack that was obvious, yeah, maybe I would go like, oh, okay. Uh, and the Newsboys song, I can't remember the name of it, but there's a line that says, we know what's crooked because we know what's straight.
Mm.
Hmm.
There's because if a straight line is supposed to be like this, and because we know what a straight line is, then we can see the crooked things.
Yeah.
Um, and so what I realized is that I'm like, did they come up with that themselves? Because that's really cool. Well,
Mm.
no, like if you were to choose anybody in the universe that would come up with a concept like that, who would you say that might, besides Jesus, who would be an author that would have that kind of a concept?
Albert Einstein. I'm just throwing
Huh.
stuff at the wall. I don't know.
C.S. Lewis.
There you
C.S.
go.
Lewis.
There you go.
Boom.
That's a better guess.
Nice. Yeah, and it's in Mere Christianity because he argues that our sense of right and wrong is like a straight line where we measure deviations, right? There's a standard of morality. That's the context that he's talking about. And so it's in this law of human nature or moral law that, in a sense, we're probably all aware of. I don't know, there's some cultures that maybe don't have any sense of that. And I was listening to a podcast just yesterday, maybe, and they're talking about how psychology is being rethought because we've only based psychology on the Western mind.
Mm.
Sure.
And
Yeah.
also what they're really moving more and more toward is the understanding of the right brain, the right hemisphere. And that's where we've camped for 25 years at Cross Council. Um, so yeah, I think about, wow, if I would have it goes back to the image of God. Like if you know what the car is supposed to look like underneath, then you can pick out things. And we don't, and the way we're supposed to be, I don't think we have a grasp, but I think there's this line that says, if we don't understand what we were intended to be, healing has no context.
Mm.
We have to know what we're intended to be. And so mind renewal, transformation, what we will benefit from having in mind is the image of God. And some of our intros have that idea. We still have the image that's imprinted on us, but the likeness of God has been diminished. It's been diminished through the brokenness of our world. It's been broken by the ways that we have sinned and the ways that we've been sinned against. And so it's tarnished. The likeness has been tarnished. And Dallas Willard talks about this too. And restoring the image of God, the Imago Dei, right? He talks about reflecting on God's goodness and wisdom. I don't know if we spend enough time meditating on that.
Mm.
And I think it's his book, Renovation of the Heart, where he uses the term spiritual formation, which is something that we're just sort of bringing back, or at least I am in my mind. Spiritual formation, renewing our mind to better align with God's image, having that authentic transformation that he does in our hearts. And the more that we come closer to understanding the image and removing those lies and the grief and the anger and the bitterness that we're holding on to, that likeness starts to shine through a little bit more. Thanks for joining us on the Cross Council podcast. Keep pursuing transformation with a courageous heart, open to what only he can do. There are many ways to get involved. Pray for us, consider supporting us, share these podcasts, and if you haven't already, take the step to jump in yourself. We'll see you next time.